Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is our own pianist in residence, Sam Page. This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. And we are especially pleased and delighted that we are being joined by a gentleman from across the pond in Europe. His name is Berneman. And just from talking to him for a few minutes, I can tell you he's one of the most laid-back people that we've had here on the show in quite some time. Very, very relaxed guy. But just because he sounds relaxed doesn't mean that he doesn't keep himself busy. In fact, he has a podcast, which I believe he calls the Conscious Action. And we're going to learn more about that as we get to know him. But first of all, Brian Berneman, thank you for joining us on the podcast today. How are you doing?
Yes, thank you all. Thank you for having me here. I'm doing great. Yes, wonderful morning here. So yes.
And where in Europe are you?
I'm actually currently in New Zealand.
New Zealand? Oh,
yes.
So not anywhere near Europe, actually.
Like in the other side, but it's okay. I was just in Europe visiting my family.
Oh, so. Okay. Well, so you're in Europe South, I guess. We'll put it that way.
There we go.
And how long have you been doing your podcast now?
It's been a little bit over 2 years. So I started it during the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, I had the idea or the plan to release a podcast a few months, like mid-2020, and suddenly I had a few episodes already pre-recorded, and I thought once everybody went into lockdown, I thought great time to share this and to be able to join people in their own homes through the podcast, so let's launch it earlier.
Yeah, sure. It was a perfect time to do exactly that. No doubt about it. And I just want to do a quick shout out, a couple of people tuning in live stream, listening in, Luke and David and the guys. Thank you for saying hello, and nice to see you guys. Luke says his best he lives in New Zealand, so we got a couple New Zealand things going on there. That's good.
Cool.
So anyway, all right. So we have an idea of how you got started, but why did you get started doing your podcast?
Yeah, so I've been running Conscious Action as an organization now for the last 5.5 years. And with Conscious Action, all of our focus is on connecting people to themselves, connecting people to others, and connecting people to the environment. So it's basically just understanding how this connection is at the root of all of the issues that we have, whether that are personal relationships, community-based, or our relationship with the earth and how we're treating her. So it's coming back to a place of well-being in all of that. And I've been doing that through working through events and workshops and one-on-one and working with businesses, working with individuals, and creating the podcast was just an extension of that. It's just being able to share stories and to have conversations as a way of connecting, just like we're doing right now. This is a wonderful way of being able to connect with people, and to connect with anyone that is anywhere around the world, that is able to just resonate with the message that we are sharing, and therefore being able to get inspired and to perhaps click on certain things that they haven't yet, to be well and to be able to live a life that is meaningful for themselves.
Well, you're certainly pushing buttons that we know very well around here, so we're very grateful about that. And I totally agree. The internet and the different facilities we have on the internet has made all of the difference in the last, well, even before the pandemic, going back, well, certainly at least 5 years. I think I started my podcast 10 years ago, and it was a little bit limited in terms of what kinds of technology you had available at that point. But since then, we've got Zoom, we got StreamYard, we got all these different platforms like this. We got different places to post your stuff. They help post stuff for you. I mean, it's all the stuff that's grown up. And that's just the podcast part of it, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's also live connections of various kinds. So yeah, it's been quite a thing that has grown up over the last few years. So thank you for taking advantage to reach out to people during that time. I mean, because I know what it's like, you know, it's an adventure, and it's also a venture to get something like this going and to keep it going. So congratulations for doing that. Yeah.
Thank you.
So yes, what do you find to be the most gratifying part? I mean, when I know you don't do something like this just because it's a job. You do it because it's a passion. So what's the passion side like?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, many years ago, just to give you an idea, I decided at one point in my life, this was like now, almost it seems like a lifetime ago, I decided to go and pursue more in depth my own understanding on myself, on how do I fit, who am I, and what it is that I want to do in this world. And I decided to move to California, to the middle of the mountain, to a Tibetan Buddhist retreat center.
Oh,
And there, not only I learned about myself a lot, through a lot of different practices of yoga and meditation, but most importantly, I understood how work is a reflection of how I want to show up in the world. So I changed a lot my perspective of what does work mean, and work, instead of being something that I did for making money to be able to pay for things, switched to being how I want to show up in the world and what it is that I want to do every day. And fortunately now I can actually make a living out of doing that, which is wonderful.
congratulations. Yes.
Beautiful.
Because it's and I hope that someday this is true for everyone. And, like there's platforms now like Patreon or Coffee or different platforms that allow people to be supported and into doing what they want to do and how they want to show up. Because for me, it's all about creating connections and to be able to share a lot of these different practices, traditions, and perspectives that have helped me to be able to live within society, and as well not to live with stress. Also, like to live stress-free, to live with purpose, to live with the sense of I love what I'm doing. And it doesn't feel like when I talk to people, like when they're going to work, they have to go to work. I'm like, I get to work. I get to go to work and to do what I love and to support people and to have conversations with people. Like, I mean, the podcast, I love the podcast. It's a wonderful way of being able to, like, to have this connection. Whatever it is that it's happening is creating time and space to connect. And I'm here in this moment with you. And when I'm recording my podcast, I'm connecting with all of those people. And everyone has something inspiring in their story. This is something that I have learned many years ago, that everyone can be our teacher. Anyone, if we pay attention to their story, there's something there that is really interesting, really unique, because nobody really has ever been that person. So no one knows what it is to be them. And when I'm able to get into that space, to just have, like 1 hour or so to speak with someone, and not to be like I see with most people, it's like they just meet someone, it's like, hey, how are you? And like, it's kind of like just a very superficial check-in and not even truthful. And I'm like, that's what I want, the depth of experience.
Yeah, I agree with you. And in fact, that's one of the major, that plus what you mentioned earlier, wanting to learn. Those are the two major reasons why I started my podcast and why I continue doing it to this day. The way I'd like to express it is I love the viewpoints. I'm sure you do the same thing, but I get so many guests on with so many different viewpoints. I don't always agree with all of them, but I appreciate all of them because almost every single one of them has something to teach me. And on those rare occasions where it doesn't have something to teach me, then I have to like do a double check to say, okay, what did I miss? Because I know it's probably me. It's not the other person. And Sam knows as well. Sam's been a listener for, by the way, Sam, I love that t-shirt. He's got a t-shirt on that says love is love, repeated over and over and over again. I like that. Really nice.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, since you've been listening to the podcast, right? You've been listening for a few years now, and then you just came on, within the past year to also co-host. When you were just a listener, wasn't that pretty much the perspective you were getting, that you were loving the perspectives, that you were loving the different, viewpoints that were coming on?
Absolutely, yeah, because just every human being has their own individual journey and their own life experience. No two people's stories are alike, and just the experiences and the stories that people had to share were always something different and fresh, and you can always take something valuable from pretty much any of them.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so it's the most powerful thing that there is, I think.
Yeah, and as both of you are saying, I think that one of the key things for me is understanding everyone is kind and everyone like is loving, like as you're having on your t-shirt, love is love. Like everyone is a loving, kind, compassionate person.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, alongside that, a lot of people have a lot of past experiences that have formed them to shape their mind and their beliefs in different ways. Especially like I work with a lot of like people with mental health issues or with some trauma, and that we all have trauma.
Sure.
And that is, understanding that anytime that someone behaves in a way that I'm like, ooh, or I don't agree with, is understanding it's not them. They are loving people. It's what they have been carrying that is, and what they are not seeing, that are all of that trauma and all of those things that are just heavy, and they are just repeating certain patterns that doesn't even help them. So instead of me judging them and pointing fingers, it's about looking at them with compassion and with love, understanding at their essence, there's a human being there that all that they want to like is to be seen and to know that they are enough and that they are loved. And when I can do that, then as well, like through my work, I can give them space to see that for themselves. Because a lot of times people think they are not deserving. There's, like I work, especially like when I work at the university that I teach here or with a lot of younger people, there's so many with depression and with anxiety and suicidal. And it's like, well, like, how do we change that? Because the world is getting even more and more separated. Like everyone, like it's not coming together, and people don't realize they don't have as many skills to share how to be with each other and how to hold space when the other one doesn't want to be told something. They just want to be.
I don't know if you're familiar with the teachings of Abraham Hicks, but I love the way that they express what you just talked about, because the way they express it is, whenever you're feeling discord, you're really not feeling discord because of somebody else. You're feeling discord because of how you feel about your inner being, and your inner being is in conflict with something that you're embracing in your outer world, which is when the first time I ever heard that one, it stopped me in my tracks. I was like, whoa, okay, wait a minute. What did they just say? Repeat that one again. I didn't quite get that the first time. But after, kind of focusing on it for a bit and just sitting with it, I realized, that's really it. If it weren't for the disagreement we have with ourselves, we'd actually be pretty happy people.
Right.
Most of the time, right?
Yeah. And the interesting thing that I always tell to everyone that I work with is we all have the potential to be that, because that's all the things that we haven't looked into. Most of us that we live in this modern society, we haven't been modeled, shown, or even given the time and the space to understand how do we operate, who are we. And that's something that fortunately I was able to create the time and the space for myself through, like saying, I'm just going to step out of this society and I'm going to go to the middle of the mountain to live in this retreat center. And not everyone does that.
No, that's not a normal career path.
No. And like, and staying with it and being able to practice this every day. And I think that by understanding myself, I understand much more exactly what you just said and exactly what Abraham Hicks and many others share. That is the truth. That is that what everybody does and circumstances, it's not it. It's about what do we experience from that? Because in this moment, we have on this podcast, like the three of us here, and the three of us are experiencing something very different, yet supposedly we believe that we're experiencing the same thing. So how can I step out of the idea that we're experiencing the same thing where there's nothing that is objective? Everything is subjective.
Right. Exactly. I've said that so many times. And I don't remember exactly when it was. I'm going to say it was probably shortly after the turn of the millennium that I came to the realization that there was no such thing as objectivity. And that was a shock, because I had believed in objectivity for quite some time, very strongly. And when I finally realized that was true, it kind of knocked my feet out from underneath me, because now I didn't know, okay, well, if that's gone, what's left? like all the underpinnings got wiped out. So all I'm trying to say is it can be a rather, I don't want to say traumatic, dramatic experience to come to that realization. Does that say a few, Sam? I'm seeing you're nodding your head.
I think so, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You have these like big realizations that come out. Whoa, okay.
Right. Yeah, they get your attention.
And at the same time, how wonderful it is to actually start to wake up to how things are. And like I live in these communities and spaces that, are more, let's call them conscious or spiritual. And a lot of people talk about waking up, like, I think that sometimes people think it's this amazing, like wonderful experience. No, waking up is like reality check. And sometimes it's wonderful because there's a lot of things in life that are wonderful. And sometimes it's like, hey, like you haven't been paying attention to this. And now all of this that was under the rug, now it's out in the open. And as society, the same things happen. And when that happens, it comes as a shock, and it comes, like with then movements like the Me Too movement, like not to get too much into it, but that was stuff that was before happening, but it was, kept in the shadows, kept under the rugs, and suddenly it's like this exploded. And it's not that now it's happening. Now we are just aware of it.
Yeah, that second kind you were talking about, I call that the 2x4 moment. That's where the universe has been tapping you on the shoulder and you ignored it, and then it tapped harder and you ignored that, and they gave you a push and you ignored that, and then finally got off the 2x4. Whoa, okay, I'm paying attention now.
Yes.
Sometimes we just don't listen to ourselves very well.
But that's the thing. We haven't learned how to listen for most people. So then we get all of this, This is one of the biggest things for me was when I was a teenager and I went to this Tibetan yoga class, and for the first time in my life, I felt my body. I had never felt my body before that. I had always listened to my head. Yeah. And making that change of just listen to my head to allow the space for my feelings, that gave me the recognition that my body was, as you're saying, all of the time, shoulder tapping. It's like, hey, this is happening, or hey, don't go there, or hey, like all of these intuitions or feelings that we get. And when we don't listen to it, that starts to create more of what in my language I call it energetic blockages. And it's all of the unprocessed and traumatic events, but just anything that has been unprocessed feelings that starts to build up and to build up and to build up. And there we get all of the illnesses and all of the physical issues. They're just, we didn't pay attention.
Exactly. Or it may not even be that we didn't pay attention. Maybe that we deliberately turned it off.
Yes.
I say that because I just know in my own case, not so much, turn it off probably isn't even the right phrase either. Ignored.
Just numbing. Yeah.
There was a numbing. Yeah. Like for instance, I remember I had been doing this podcast for about 3-4 years, and I still didn't really have a good sense of what that internal connection was supposed to be like. I was asking co-hosts about it. I was asking guests about it, trying to find that connection. And after a lot of really helpful conversation, people were trying their best to help me, find my way to what was going on all along. I finally realized that there was this thing. I couldn't identify what it was. I couldn't tell you much about it because it was constant. I thought of it as like a constant light that never went off. And it felt like it was inside, and it had always been there. And I just kind of learned to dismiss it because it never changed. It was always just on, always just there. And I finally realized it had been there all along, and that was probably it. And when I realized that, I said, well, no wonder I didn't understand. No wonder I didn't connect to it. I didn't know what I was connecting to because it never changes. And let's be honest, we are human beings. We live in a world of contrast, of polarity. We rely on that contrast. We rely on that polarity. So when the polarity is lacking, when there's no dark to be opposite the light, we don't know what to do with it. It's just part of the way we process things. But once I made that connection, once I understood that was the connection, well, I felt like I was no longer left out. I actually felt left out before. I felt like everybody else had it, not me. I thought there was like something wrong.
And everybody feels that, it's one of the things. It's one of the things. Yes. Go, Sam.
Oh no, I thought you were talking about a bad connection because they were breaking up, and I was like, oh, I think we're good now.
Oh, okay.
Like
Well,
one of the
it's a
things,
different kind of connection,
yeah,
but yeah, I mean, you're on the right track. You know?
one of the things, that I see sometimes is, I'm facilitating a class and I see people, kind of like looking through the corner of the eye to the other people. And I'm like, this is not competition. Just go back to yourself. Nobody's caring about what you think. Everybody thinks that you are thinking about them. Everybody thinks that they are the ones being judged. And as you're saying, like we live with this, like everybody's judging me, and it's, who cares? That's one of the greatest gifts that my parents gave me. I don't know how they did it, but they gave me this who cares mentality. It's not that not caring about people. It's about not allowing myself to be someone that I'm not because someone else might think something of me, or even if they do think of that, even if they tell me that is who I want to be. Like when I was a teenager, I remember being 12 or 13, something like that. And, like my friends started to get into discovering and trying to explore, drinking alcohol or smoking cigarettes and stuff like that. And I didn't want to do it. And I said no. And I was, like perfectly okay with that and perfectly okay with being called the loser because I wasn't doing that. And I'm like, cool, like I'm a loser. Who cares? Like I don't care if you think that. I don't want to do that. And I could see how so many of my friends that I knew that they didn't want to do that, they felt pressured into doing that. Yeah. Whether that was direct pressure or just in their mind, right, that they felt that pressure. And that is something that as society, the more that we are able to learn about ourselves, the more that we can stand our ground into who we want to be, into who we are, and to coming back to that essence that, it's hard to pinpoint it because it's not there. It's not, like it's something that we can see so easily. But when we come back to it, then we can stand our ground and we can stand behind our principles and our beliefs and our values. And then we start living in a way that it doesn't matter if others agree or not. It's aligned to who we are.
Mm. Yeah. Well, who we truly are is what I think you're saying there. And that's part of that discovery process that we've been talking about pretty much from the beginning of the conversation here, learning to discover who we are to ourselves and what our relationship is to ourselves. I think it's really what the root of it is. I mean, you're right. We live in a society where people are essentially trained by the culture to look for judgment all the time. And so we expect to be judged and we expect to judge, and it's a judging way of life. So when we're faced with a situation where all of a sudden people don't judge, that also can be disconcerting.
Right.
Right?
Why aren't you judging me?
Yeah, there's something wrong with you. Come on.
Most people don't know how to be with that. When I'm having conversations with someone, especially, like with clients, but even with some friends, and all that I'm doing is just listening. Mm-hmm. For some people, it's disconcerting. They don't know what to do. It's like, what do you think? What do you think? Like, you haven't interjected anything. You haven't judged me. You haven't said this happens to me too. You haven't hijacked this conversation. It's like they sometimes they don't know what to do. And that's the thing. We've been conditioned in a certain way. And in this modern society, like something that I say often is everything is going fast. Where we're going, people don't know. They're just going fast. They're just in case. And instead of slowing down and just in case that, I'm
you don't want to miss something, right?
Yeah. It's that. It's like, oh, I'm missing out on what everybody seems to be like, they got it. And nope. Most people don't got it. Most people are just chasing something and they haven't created the time and the space to slow down and to make a self-inquiry and to question things. And, that place of connecting when we connect, life changes, because I see this, and this is one of the reasons of the work that I do, is as I see how this connection is at the root of all of the issues that we have then the symptoms that are showing us that disconnection, and we have the inner disconnection, the inner symptom, and the outer symptom, and the inner symptom is, as I said, depression, anxiety, stress, suicidal tendencies. And the external one is climate change and what's happening in our environment and how we're treating our environment and our natural spaces. These are just the symptoms of that root cause that is the disconnection. Because if I understand how precious my life is, then I will change the way that I am to not get to that place. If I understand my connection to the earth and to the natural world, then I won't treat the earth in a way that is disrespectful, that is treating her, just taking resources and not caring for her. So when we just see sometimes the symptoms, all that we're trying to do is put, like a Band-Aid here and there, instead of going back to the root cause that is actually getting back to that place of connection. And when we can connect in that way, then it's easier to, to treat myself kindly. It's easier to treat others kindly. It's easier to treat the earth with reverence and being a guardian for this earth instead of, treating her like just a dumping ground.
I remember the first time, excuse me, that I was exposed to the concept of the law of attraction and trying to understand how it worked. And I honestly didn't quite get it at first. It actually seemed rather false and contrived and so forth. I said, no, that doesn't really make any sense to me. But the more that I studied it, and also because I was in circumstances where I was going to be more open to it than I would have been in the past, that combination led me to a couple of, a number of different, ideas, a number of different aha moments that came through. And one of them came through in a conversation that I had with someone here on the podcast who pointed out to me that the world is basically our mirror and that it is reflecting back to us everything that we're putting out there. And that was one of those, stun you in your tracks moments. That's the way I experienced it. Like, well, wait a minute. Really? Oh, well, I guess that's what the law of attraction says would happen. So I get that. And I had to sit with it for a while. But after I sat with it for a while, I realized, wow, it's really true. In fact, it's in all areas of our lives. Everything that we experience, everything that becomes a part of our external experience, let's put it that way, is also a reflection of what's going on internally. And that's a stunning realization to come to, because all of a sudden you have a load of responsibility you didn't have before, or that you thought you didn't have before.
Yes, and that is one of the things that I always, for me, it's taking self-responsibility for my life and encouraging people to do that the same for themselves. Take self-responsibility. We have a tendency, and even just the way that we talk, we have a tendency to use the we and the you, just instead of talking about me. In everything, like when I'm working with clients or when I'm teaching, I encourage everyone that is participating, at least during that moment, because from a communication standpoint, it's much harder to just say, I this, I that, because then everybody thinks I'm just, super selfish and I'm just making everything about me. And it's like, well, no, that's just my reality. I cannot put my reality onto you. And one of the things as well that I think that is super important is to understand all of the subconscious and the unconscious parts of our life. Because when we understand that, we understand as well that it's not just what we are consciously choosing every day, that, as we are saying with the law of attraction, that we're putting into the field, and it's like, like abundance or whatever it is that we want in our lives. It's like, well, if I haven't healed, if I haven't integrated, healing is about integrating, coming back to that place of wholeness. So when I'm working with people and I'm doing, I see them for healings or for some, holistic treatment, I'm not healing them. I'm not a healer. I always say to them, it's just you coming back to your wholeness. And all that I'm doing is just creating the space and giving you some keys to open some doors, but it's you the one that needs to open them. That's the self-responsibility, is that there's no one that is going to come and save you. It's you saving yourself. Yes, we can do that together. Yes, we can support each other. Yes, we can be there for one another. Yet it is me the one that needs to do my own work, and I cannot do it for you. I can hold your hand. I can help you and support you in the way that you want. And when one is able to integrate more and more and more, because there's a lot, and I work with not only what happened in this lifetime, I work what happened in past lifetimes and what happened to our ancestors, that we are carrying that for our ancestors and all of that trauma. And that's why I said we all have trauma, because all of our ancestors lived in times that things were much worse than now, and there were much more wars and deaths and everything. So until the time that we integrate all of that and we bring that into light, and we can see that, and we can be grateful for all of that, even the very negative things, then we're able to then project into the field and live from the present moment forward, from a heart-connected place, and being able to see how do I want to live, and what is the field then going to have, as you're saying, to mirror back to me from the place of not just what I'm thinking, my whole being, conscious, unconscious, subconscious.
Yeah. You used a very interesting word there. It's a word we use often here on the show. I think people use it a lot in life. And the word is integrate. And the way you were using it was in a very specific way, one that I certainly appreciate. I think Sam appreciates it too. One thing that has come out of my understanding of integration in the way that we're talking about it here, is that different people approach it in different ways. And I'm going to be curious to know what your approach is. Let me tell you what I mean. For instance, if you propose the idea to somebody that they are essentially responsible for how they respond to everything that goes on in their lives, there are a number of different ways they can integrate that. They can actually try to integrate that in a way of judgment. They can judge themselves and make themselves guilty and get really, really harsh about themselves. Or as an alternative, they can decide that the integration means that there's all this stuff out there that they're responsible for healing. It's all, they aren't quite sure what they did to create it, but they have to solve the whole thing. There's also a perspective that says that, well, yes, there have been, like you made reference to the past. There have been many, many wars in the past. There's been deaths. There's been destruction. There's been all kinds of stuff. But by the same token, we don't have to look at it as being horrible stuff. So lots of different ways of looking at integration. I'm curious, how do you look at that word when you think of it? How do you look at that concept, really?
Yes, thank you for that, because a lot of times, and this is crucial, understanding what do we mean by the words that we're saying.
Right?
Because we're using words thinking that we have the same meaning behind it, and a lot of times that's not true.
Mean a lot of different things,
yeah.
Especially in English.
Yes, and I grew up with Spanish, Hebrew, and English, so well, I have multiple meanings in different words.
That makes it even more interesting.
One of the things for me with integration for me is about allowing the space to include that which was excluded. So, and I use this a lot from the family constellations or systemic constellations perspective. That is one of the tools that I use, that it's about bringing that which hasn't been seen or has been put under the rag, or even all of those feelings that I haven't processed, all of that trauma that I didn't want to see because my body was protecting me. Because that's the defense mechanism, as we were talking before. If someone is numbing their experience, they are not feeling, that's a defense mechanism. If someone doesn't want to see it, then that's a defense mechanism, because we are wired for survival. As we are wired for survival, there's a lot of these different things in our being or system energetically that we haven't processed, we haven't fully integrated, embraced, as we allow time and space to see all of that, to feel it, to literally process it, then we're able to integrate this. And as an example, I remember many years ago, I was in a relationship and my then girlfriend broke up with me, and I still loved her. I still wanted to be with her. Yet I understand we just broke up. So I went and I sat down, and I said to myself, I'm not going to stand until I fully feel this and I integrate this. So I sat down, and by that time I had a fairly, good meditation practice, so it didn't take me that much. But, it was roughly around 40 minutes of feeling the feelings and just allowing myself to fully feel what I was feeling, that relationship just ended. I'm losing my girlfriend, I'm losing the relationship, I'm losing who I am in relationship to that, and I'm losing my best friend, and I still had to see her at work.
Make it more interesting. Okay, yeah.
So I'm like, I'm just going to sit and really feel this and integrate this in my life. So by the time that I stood up, there was no resistance. I could see her and there was no resistance. I still loved her. That feeling didn't go away. Yet I didn't have any resistance because I actually felt the experience. I felt the feelings in my belly. I felt the feelings in my chest. I felt the feelings in my throat. I felt the feelings that were just showing up in my experience. And by processing that, I integrated that experience fully. So then I could move forward. I could move on. And it's not about moving on without looking that. It's about that. It's about integrating. From a family constellations perspective, as an example, in my own experience, my grandpa, had to escape the Poland and the Second World War because he comes from a Jewish family. And most of his family was killed there, yet he was able to escape. And when I was doing this work, I had to heal my relationship with what the Nazis did. And I even had to include from a very different, and this was one of the hardest things for me, include, Hitler and the Nazis and see them with love and see them from a place of gratitude, not, like taking them off the hook for what they did. They're responsible for what they did. It's about me not being a victim anymore because my family was living from a place of victimhood because of what was done. And so, well, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't because that happened, because if that didn't happen, my grandpa wouldn't have escaped and wouldn't have done everything that he did in order for then my father to be born and then for me to be born. So if I can change the lens of some of the things that already happened, I cannot change what happened. I can change my relationship to it, and I can change how my entire family or my system looks at that. And then by me being able to bring and shine some light into it and then feel it and integrate it from a very different perspective, then life changes. And that's how we move forward. That's how we integrate, by including, by embracing, by loving and being grateful and honoring of everything that came before, because that's what happened to bring me to this point.
I love that. That's fabulous. And what you're talking about is very advanced. I mean, that's something that, that's something you learn first thing out of the blocks when you're starting to do some self exploration. That's like, I'll get to that about 5 years from now. You put that one off to last because that's the tough one. And there are a lot of people, we know this. There are a lot of people in society who would reject you for saying that. Who would say you have no appreciation for all the people who were harmed by the Nazis, and they will give you lists and lists of all the horrors and so forth. So,
and that's that's the key of how to hold multiple perspectives at the same time. It's not honoring that. Honor that. I lived my entire life in a sense when I was a kid, honoring that, like seeing all of the time the victims of the Holocaust and being part of a Jewish family was all of the time that, and it's like, that still is true. We still need to honor. We still need to remember. We still don't want this to be repeated. And at the same time, how can I change my trauma, my family trauma, so that we can move forward and choosing life instead of, again, being a victim? Is how can I take back power in my life and not give it away anymore? And I think that, when I work with a lot of clients, like I had clients that they were physically abused, and to be able to get to the point in the work that we are doing, for them to be grateful for that abuse and for that person, it takes a lot It takes a big shift in mindset, but it's about feeling. And it's not taking off the hook that person.
No.
Like, that person still did something that is not right. Yet understanding that person did that because that was what they knew. They were playing out their own traumas. This is what happens, like with 99% of the people, or I would say 100% of the people that go to jail. These are people that are playing out trauma.
Oh yeah.
Instead of seeing them as someone that is doing something wrong, it's about understanding and being able to be like, oh my God, there's this trauma and we haven't done anything about that. Of course that you're going to do that horrendous thing. Of course that you're going to, be emotionally unavailable. Of course that you're not going to be present. Of course that whatever it is, whichever step people are taking, because that's what they've been carrying and that's what they know. And that's how they were shown love. And they've been shown that, the only time that someone is seeing you perhaps is when they were hitting you when you were a kid. So of course that's all that you know. And you have that trauma because we haven't shared with people in this world how to heal, how to be able to integrate, how to be able to feel experience instead of just thinking everything rationally, because this, it hasn't been working.
Not particularly well, no.
If we look out, it's like, oh my God, things are not in a very good space. So
it's amazing how often it fails to work. That's the part that blows my mind.
Yeah.
Because I did what everybody else did. I was taught that same thing. So I tried to use that same method for years and it just led to a crash and burn. And I said, well, there's something wrong with the logic here. Something isn't working. And I had to come to the conclusion that the premises I was given were not the right premises. They just weren't the ones to lead me to where I needed to be. But that's a lot to take in. It's a lot to absorb. It really is. And it can be a lifetime to do it too.
Yes. And Walt, even if it takes a lifetime, one of the things that I keep on sharing with people is don't wait until you hit rock bottom. That's usually the place where people start to change. It's like, realize things are not great or things can be better. That was me. I was like, there's more to life. I didn't hit rock bottom. There's more to life. This cannot be it. And I wanted to explore, and there's now so much available, whether that is online, on YouTube, or actually working with people like the work that I do. There's so much available that why wait another day? Because that day that we're not doing anything, that day might come where we hit rock bottom, and sometimes we don't get back up, at least in this lifetime, from rock bottom.
I'm sure you have experienced this through your podcast. I've experienced this a lot through doing this podcast. I know Sam has experienced it. Sam and I have both been through a program called the TIA program where we explored very much the same kinds of things you're talking about here. And through the various other speakers who've been on the program here that I've learned from, again, the same kinds of concepts keep coming up over and over and over again. But the one thing that I am pointing to that I know you've experienced, I'm sure you have, I know I've experienced it here, is seeing more and more how people are opening up to the idea. Well, this is what we call becoming enlightened. I never really liked the phrase becoming enlightened. I think of where they turn on the light bulb or something. No, but this opening up to new possibilities and exploring new possibilities about themselves, about their relationship to life, to other people, and exploring ideas that they had never explored before, and being willing to do the kinds of things like you talked about, sitting with something that's unpleasant until you kind of work your way through it and you've released it all. That it's a new concept for most of us, and yet I'm seeing more and more and more people doing it. I take great heart from that. I take a lot of hope for mankind as a whole, seeing more and more and more and more people doing that. Right now.
And Walt, I see this completely as you're saying. There's more and more people that have woken up to the idea that their mental health is actually important, that they are living a life that perhaps is not aligned to who they want to be. And just touching on something that you just mentioned, and perhaps you didn't even mean it in this way, from what I took, that, it's about feeling, and then you said releasing. for me, it's not about releasing. It's about integrating. It's about including.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And perhaps you meant that. And this is why, like, as you asked me for what do I mean by integrating, it's that it's, it's not, cutting cords with anything. It's about, no, I want to include in everything in my life because all of that has happened.
I think when I think of the word
process.
releasing, I think of releasing in terms of releasing the angst associated with something. Releasing the frustration, the tension, that's the part that's being released. The relationship to the person or the thing itself, that remains. But it's the I'm tied up in a knot feeling that's being released.
Yes. And that's why I wanted to say that, because perhaps for someone that is watching or listening to this, their understanding of releasing is just, trying to push away. And that's not the way. The way is in. And, as you're saying, the word enlightenment, when I was learning Tibetan, because I wanted to understand more the Buddhist teachings and what it was, because, translations, they're tricky. I have done translation work in the past. It's very tricky to do translation. And one of the things, for example, that I saw from, the word Buddha, or enlightenment, that in Tibetan is Sangye. It means, inside of that word, that's how it's taken as enlightenment. There is like an understanding inside of that is everything purified, everything cleansed, and then everything expanded. Mm-hmm. So from what I take about that is that, this enlightenment or this different thing that we are trying to perhaps achieve, or that we're seeing that in certain traditions, that's the aim. There's already in the word, at least in the Tibetan language, there's the steps is go in, purify, cleanse, integrate, and then expand.
Yeah, sure. I don't know if you noticed, there's a question from the live stream. Luke in the live stream wrote a comment with a question. He says, wow, I love the soothing, calm way you were talking, Brian. I feel like I talk so fast out of maybe being nervous or something else. Were you always this calm, or is that a practiced skill?
I was definitely not, Luke. I used to be, a very stressed out person when I was a teenager. I even say, like when I started driving, I had a road rage. That was,
oh, wow.
Yes, I would be.
Or you were one of those people. Oh, okay.
Yes, I was one of those people. If someone cut me off, I was like, F you, and yes, everything. And I was a very different person in a lot of senses. I was just in my mind, and there were just certain things in life that I did a little bit slowly, like eating. For some reason, I always ate slowly. But in everyday life, everything was fast and stressful. And it was through years and years of doing all of these different practices to come back to myself and to be able to return to my essence, that I understood the importance of creating space for myself, of moving slowly, of doing things slowly. Because as I said before, where are we going so fast? When we're going too fast, all that we're doing, as Luke is pointing, is perhaps we're avoiding. We are not wanting to see. And by doing that, we keep on creating more on this backpack that we're carrying, that is perhaps 100 kilos that we're carrying on our back, carrying all of these unprocessed feelings, because that's how we survive. Yet when we create the space and the time to stop or to slow down, it changes things. And this is one of the things, a lot of times that I get asked, like, can you give me like a tip? And it's like, there's a lot of things, but I can say slow down. Slow down can change so much stuff in life, because it creates enough space for us to question things, for us to inquire, is this how I want to be? Is this how I want to respond instead of react to any given situation? When I create a space, I can respond to life. I can respond in an interaction with someone instead of reacting go into just my behaviors or the patterns of behaviors that usually come with a reaction. So if I can go slowly, and that doesn't mean, like we're not going to be operating in life and this is just, something that doesn't allow us to have good interactions. We can have this wonderful conversation and we can still take time to experience actually what's happening, to feel what's actually happening. And by doing that, I can respond, I can be present, I can pay attention, and I can respond appropriately to what life is throwing at me. So it's been a wonderful process of coming back to my body, of coming back to my breath, of coming back to a place of integrating my mind and my body, because a lot of times when I started to do this work, it was kind of like my mind is the bad guy, in meditation, in mindfulness, in a lot of these things. It seems as we put a lot of, negativity towards the mind. The mind is amazing. The mind is creative. The mind is, and a lot of times, I'm touching my head and we all point to our heads when we're talking about the mind. That's just where the brain is. That's not where mind is yet. That's where we put it. But how to integrate all of the parts of my being, how to integrate my experience, how to allow everything to be part of. And I can only do that if I relearn how to do things, if I can make changes in my life to create, meaningful interactions, to create meaning in my life, and to be able to change the way that all of those behaviors that no longer serve me, just changing them. And by me going slowly, I can do that. If I don't stop, if I don't create pauses, if I don't slow down, most likely I won't be able to change until that, the 2x4, as you say, like just hits you.
Yes, it's very good at doing that, I must say. So just returning to Luke's question, the last part of the question, I want to make sure we really answered it to his satisfaction. I think you answered it, but I'm going to let you tie the shoestring together here. He says, is it a practice skill? Do you consider what you described practicing a skill?
I think that it has definitely been through practices that I had taken as Tibetan yoga, that is a very conscious movement practice with meditation and with some of the healing practices that I have taken on during the years, and that is some of the things that now I practice with and I teach. These have all been the tools that allowed me to reconnect with myself. So in a sense, yes, it's a practice skill. It's not that was the actual practice. It's been a lot of different things that brought me to this place. Yet I had to put the effort at some point. I had to be open at some point, and I had to be willing to have courage and to be able to decide for myself. Do I want to live in this way that I was living that was unhelpful for me and was unhelpful for others? Because who wants more, like angry people on the street and stressful people, where we can have more loving people? And that was the choice that I had to make. And it takes courage. It takes sometimes discipline. And as one of my teachers used to say, to have discipline, you need to find the right discipline as the right practice. What's the practice that resonates with you? And that's how, you don't have to put as much effort. It's not a drag every day to do something. I tell a lot of times to some of my clients, perhaps it's not, let's try out different things, because sometimes it's not about a sitting meditation practice that you close your eyes and you stay still, and that might not be the right thing at this moment for that person. That might be so much effort that is not going to be the right one. Perhaps for that person at this moment in their life is about going for a walk out in nature. That is the way of connecting. So it's about finding what resonates with you, what works for you at this moment. And then, as we evolve and change because of that, then it might still be that same practice, or it might be another one.
That's beautiful. Luke responded. He says, I love that. He says, slowing down resonates very much. I needed to hear that. We sometimes don't realize how fast we are going and rushing through life. So I think you pressed a button there, maybe a few buttons.
Yes.
Definitely resonates with me too. So I appreciate Luke asking the question as well as your answer. I kind of just wrote down for myself, what's the hurry? Because that's a good question.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good way to do it, right?
And those are some, reminders I used to have for many years on my computer corner, a post-it that said shoulders. And the reason why it says shoulders was because I had a very bad posture when I was a kid, but also because most of the time, and people don't realize this, they end up being super high with their shoulders.
Oh, yeah.
Most people hold off the tension and off their stress there. So every time that I looked in my computer corner, I would just move a few times my shoulders. Yeah. And by creating that multiple times during the day, I was releasing some of that tension, and therefore I can't live without holding that there. And that was one of the reminders that I had. The other one was smile. Like I naturally don't smile as much. So it was like, just smile. And this is the thing, having reminders all of the time, because all of the teachings, all of the tools, everything is just pointers to somewhere, pointers for us to come back to the truth of who we are, to our essence, and to how we want to show up in the world. And it's not about which door or which like key do I use. It's, we're all different. So it's just finding that.
By the way, Sam, Luke liked your comment. I don't know if you saw that, but he says, I love that, Sam Page. What's the hurry, Luke? It's a great question to ask myself if I get anxious about something again. So
there we go. Yeah.
Scored a point there. There you go. Well done. I love that. And I love what you were talking about, Brian, there when you were, you kind of started to make a point and then you kind of bridged off of it. But I want to go back to the point you were making, that it can be kind of hard to narrow it down to one thing that we learned. I remember being on someone else's podcast about 3 or 4 months ago, and they asked me, at what point did you, I'm not sure how exactly the question was asked, but it was something like, at what point did you realize that you had broken through and that you made the changes you wanted to make? And I said, how long is the show? Because I mean, that was not a short answer. That was a very involved answer. It wasn't one thing. It wasn't just one point that, oh wow, the light bulb just went on. It doesn't work that way.
And for some people it does. Like for some people there's recognition of certain, like I can recognize, that like 2 times in my teenage years where things drastically changed, because I realized, as I said, the first class that I went for Tibetan yoga was the first time that I felt my body, I felt my feelings. I was like, wow, I can recognize that as like a huge change.
Yeah,
and then the other one, when I went to learn how to do Reiki healing, like just the experience of feeling the energy between my hands, just being there, and suddenly, like my teacher is like, okay, we're going to start. And I'm like, whoa. And it's
what
like,
was that?
and those two, as a teenager, especially, those two gave me such an experiential thing that I had never experienced before, that then, and it's been a solid 17, 18 years after that now, but of practicing and learning different traditions and opening my mind to different perspectives and practicing and taking time and slowing down. Yet I recognize there have been moments like that, or when I decided, like, I'm just going to leave this society and I'm going to go to the middle of the mountain to live at the Tibetan Buddhist retreat center. And it's like, well, like I have a few, in a sense, milestones. And at the same time, as you're saying, this is a constant daily thing. Yep. And one of the things for me that is so important is the recognition that it doesn't matter what we have done up until this moment. Each moment is a new opportunity. Each moment gives us a chance to change. Each moment gives us the opportunity, because each moment is new. And, it's like when someone makes, like a New Year resolution or something like that, it's like, well, you didn't keep it. Well, you can now, and now, and now, and now, and now. So having that understanding, every moment is a new opportunity, then that takes a lot of the pressure off as well. And it's not about being complacent or being lazy and not doing it, yet it's about how amazing that each moment I get to choose. Each moment I get to come back to be like, oh, I was completely not aware. I was acting completely on automatic pilot, completely unconscious. And now I had a moment, for whatever reason, whether that was because I've been practicing or not, that I realized it's like, whoa, how do I want to choose to be now? Who do I want to choose to be now? How do I choose to show up? And that is what we have the opportunity each moment in our life to decide. And it's never too late. And that's one of the things, like it doesn't matter what age we have. Every moment is a new opportunity.
I love that.
Absolutely.
Brian's podcast is called the Conscious Action. I'm sure it's available on all major and most minor platforms everywhere. So
Yes.
Wherever you listen to a podcast, that's where you'll find it. If someone wants to reach out to you, how do they find you, Brian?
Yes, they can find me either through Conscious Action and that, NZ as New Zealand, Conscious Action NZ on social media, or through the Conscious Action podcast or consciousaction.co.nz as New Zealand, or through my name, Brian Berneman as well. And they can find me there. They can check out the podcast. They can see all of the ways that they can work with me doing online courses or working one-on-one. So yes, I'm there available, and I'd love to connect with people as well.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you for spending this time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. And
you.
Something I've been trying to make a practice to do, and I keep saying that as a reminder to myself. So I'm going to remind myself once more. I want to thank you on behalf of all the people whom you have helped over the years, who you will never meet, you'll never see. You don't know, you can't see the impact you've had on their lives. But on their behalf, I want to thank you for all the work that you have done and that you continue to do. And thank you for joining us today.
Yeah.
Thank you for creating the time. Thank you for both of you for being here and creating this platform. And as well, I'm sure that there's countless beings that are resonating with this and that you have supported and helped through the years. So thank you.
Beautiful thing. And Sam, as usual, I have to say once again, it's great that the last couple of weeks you have a good mic. We can actually hear you. That's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
That too.
All right. That's good stuff. So we're looking forward to more of that. And we didn't get any piano today, but we're going to have to hear something. I know you did a recording session. You got to give us something from the recording session sometime soon.
I'll work on that maybe next week.
Okay. Yeah. Because we got to hear this stuff. I got to tell you, Brian, Sam is an amazing pianist. He is an undiscovered talent. And we discovered him. But
yes.
One step at a time.
I'm okay, I guess. No.
So thank you very much, Sam. Thank you, Brian. Thank you to our live streamers, and thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.